Hey guys, Jim here. Welcome into Guest Blade episode number 19 and one of the most special episodes to date. Reason being, we're going to make this an all-Mayo episode. For those that don't know what that means, we're looking at three knives being represented here as a pretty good representation too. I think we've got a nice little mix here. Three different knives made by a master knife maker named Tom Mayo. Before we get into Tom and who he is and the individual knives that we're looking at here, I want to give a very, very big thank you to the three gentlemen that made this possible. And one in specific would be Chris Tran, who really put all of this together. He contacted me out of the blue one day and said, you know, there is a hardcore group of Mayo fans. And I knew this to be true. It's just like, you know, Hinderer fans or Strider fans or whatever. But these guys are like seriously hardcore about Mayo knives. He says, we've got a really serious group of Mayo lovers, and some of us would really like to see you do a video in your Guest Blade series and kind of get your spin and your opinions on the knives. Kind of, I don't want to say an outsider's view, but, you know, somebody that doesn't collect any Mayos. I don't have any Mayos of my own. I've been trying to find a Dr. Death flipper for I don't know how long, and you're going to hear me talk more about this later, but it's just really, really hard to get your hands on one of Tom's knives. And he says, you know, we kind of want to see what you think of it and, you know, show people that haven't had a chance to experience them what the rage is all about. So we're going to dissect these a little bit. I'm going to forewarn you, there is a lot to cover here, a lot of ground to cover. This will most likely be a two-part episode. So let's just prepare yourself now. My camera cuts me off at 23 minutes. We still don't know why. So plan on this being the first 23 minutes, and then we will try to get another, 10, 15, 20 minutes into a second viewing tonight all at the same time, so you can go from one to the other and not have too much of a delay. All right, so Chris kind of got all this together, and Chris sent me this one. We'll talk about these individually in a moment. Gentleman named John, and a lot of you guys know him on USN and on Instagram. On Instagram, he goes under, and I'm probably mispronouncing this, Sobchak Security. Sobchak Security. I probably butchered that, and I apologize, but I'm going to put everybody's names and Instagrams and all that kind of good stuff in the description below, provided I remember to, with all my excitement of this. And another gentleman named Gene. Now, I don't know Gene at all, so I don't know if it's okay to say his last name or anything else. So I'm going to leave it generic there at that. And if he says, "Hey, it's okay," then I'll put that in the comments down below. All right, so let's talk about what these knives are individually so that we can kind of break them down. What we're looking at first is this big, ginormous monster, 4 1/4 inch blade. This is Tom Mayo's Moran Bowie XL. And some people like to say Bowie, some people like to say Bowie. For me, you go off the man's name, JOHN Bowie. It was pronounced Bowie, so I'm going to say Bowie. And I know that Tough Thumbs and a lot of other people are going to give me hell for it. Gavco will back me up, though. It's Bowie. And I particularly like this one because it has more holes. I like that. Look at that. You can see through it. And I love when you close a Mayo and it transforms. That's one of the neat things about his knives. And I don't want to get too much off on a tangent here. I'm supposed to be going down the line here. But I love that transformation that's made when you open and close one of his knives. Just beautiful, just gorgeous. So the next one in line here is actually kind of a rare piece, come to find out. This is a Dr. Death, and the Dr. Death is one of those models that if you know Mayo knives and you've heard about Mayo knives, it's one of the models that you'll hear about a lot. This one's a bit rarer, being done in carbon fiber. We'll discuss why a little bit later on when we get more in depth. But this is going to be a 154 CPM 154 blade in here as well. The markings, it was basically at one point Tom was going based off of the vanadium content in CPM 154, so he marked his blades the same way Ken Onion did, and I think Ken Onion still does, marked them 154V. You'll see on this one that he's gone to the standard CPM 154 marking on his blades now. But that was one of the kind of one of his signatures, along with Ken Onion. And then this sweet, sweet little baby right here. This is the medium-sized covert. And for me, like I said, the one that I really want the most is the Dr. Death Flipper. It's actually Dr. Death Jr. Flipper. But this is another one that I really want to have in my collection. Even though this is a bit smaller than I normally buy, there's a lot of special, unique things about this one. So we're going to be talking about this one last. So we may not even get to this in this first segment here. But the blade steel that's being used is a 6K Stellite. Very, very unique steel. I'm going to have a lot of fun talking to you guys about that. And super, super smooth. Really a nicely made knife. And that one just has one single hole. But again, same effect. When you close that blade, see if we can get it to focus here. There we go. Just a cool little thing. You wouldn't think that, you know, cutting a hole into a handle would be anything more than just cutting a hole into the handle, but it provides some an interesting look. I really like this one a lot. The more I play with this one, the more I like it. And he's got the MOA bead on here too from Mayo. Okay, so let's get into Tom Mayo first. You know, this is an old school dude, man. He's been doing this since 1981. So yeah, you're definitely reaching back in time a little bit, looking at his experience level, and it helps you understand why his knives are made to the degree of perfection that they are. He was actually initially inspired by Bob Loveless, seeing articles that were written about him, seeing the knives that he made. It inspired him to become a knife maker. He was working with furniture, woodworking, things like that. Somebody told me that he at one point was making surfboards. I don't know for sure about that. Obviously, living in Hawaii for as long as he has, that makes perfect sense to me. But, I mean, you go back to looking at Bob Loveless designs. I mean, you're looking at one of the legendary knife makers. So if you're going to be inspired by anybody, that's a hell of a great place to start. And Tom actually admits in his bio that in the beginning stages, and even throughout parts of a good part of his career, he was emulating a lot of what Loveless did in the design work and the manufacturing process, or I should say making process of his knives. He was tutored under Glenn Hornby, another, you know, again, another big name in the old-timers knife making, if you will, back when, you know, there were no CNC machines, there were no water jet machines for knife making, and everything had to be done by hand, with hand tools and hand guidance on big machines. That's the way it was, and that's exactly what Mayo is doing today. He does his own stock removal. When you look at his titanium, I'll use this because it's just easier to grab. Everything here was cut out by him. He didn't send this out for CNC or water jet. This was all done by him, by hand, with, I don't want to make it sound cheap by saying simple, basic tools, but that's really what they are. When you're not running a computer-controlled machine, it is, in general terms, a simple basic tool. Whether it be a bandsaw, whether it be a grinder, there's simple basic tools in the world of, you know, steelworking and whatnot. And he brings out such a level of excellence in all of his knives that really they would have to be handmade. And every one is going to have a slight variance from knife to knife, whether it's the hole patterns he's chosen or just some small little thing. And that gives you that indication that you are dealing with a handmade product. He really likes working with exotic steels. You know, we talked about for a second there the 6K Stellite. He loves working with Talonite. He's done some really cool things, and getting into these more expensive, more exotic, and harder to work with steels just shows the tenacity that I feel that he has. Again, this is not one of the makers that I'm friends with, not a maker that I know or have even corresponded with at all. So I'm having to go based off of the stories that are out there, his biography, and just looking at the products that he's made. I can't make any assumptions as to why he's designed something a certain way. I can only give you my opinion in the way that I read his workmanship and how that translates into the real world. So forgive me if there's maybe an element of a story I'm missing, or or anything else, or I may be mistaken about why he did something. I'm really just going to be giving you my perspective on what I see here. One of the things that I like, one of the things that John told me, and this is John's knife right here, one of the things I loved and it stuck out in my mind, he says mayos are like the Apple products of the knife world. And that's really a great way to put it, because everything is made to be, very clean, very simple. I mean, when you look at an Apple product, there's one button here, two buttons here, and a switch. A simple button here. There's no extra buttons all over the place. There's no extra doodads anywhere. It's simple. It's got a simple user interface, and it's something everyone can understand without any extraneous bullshit. And that's exactly what you're getting with his knives. You'll notice there are no lock bar stabilizers, no over travel prevention. There's no steel lock bar insert, because he feels, and again, I don't want to try and read his mind, but the way I interpret it is, he feels that if you make a knife the right way and you take your time and you do it by hand and you know what the hell you're doing, you don't need any of those things. Now, me personally, I am a guy that likes to have maybe not even a lock bar stabilizer, because I really have never experienced any titanium frame lock go in this direction. But I have had knives where, I'm going to use this little guy for an example because it's even easier to do it on this one. I've had plenty of knives where I've gone to disengage the lock and I can very easily push that lock bar over, and I felt that having an over travel is a good idea. He's got the perfect amount of tension with the material that he's removed here, the steepness that he's removed it at, and the thickness that he's using, that I really don't feel I can ever overextend that. So there's no need for it. His locks aren't sticky. The blade geometry, the lock geometry is dead on perfect. So when you pick up a Mayo, they're all going to be 10 to 20% lockup. You're not going to pick up one that has like 60% lockup for no reason. He's done it right, so he doesn't need to have a steel lock insert. So he's not having to make up for any mistakes that he's made, because he's just simply not going to let something out of his shop that had a mistake in the first place. One of the things that I liked about his philosophy is it's an unconditional guarantee on his knives. If there's anything wrong with it, he will make it right, period. That's all he says. He says, okay, I can't, adjust for natural materials made in nature. Some of his hunting fixed blade knives or whatever that have wood handles or whatnot, things are going to naturally happen to natural materials. But something like these, anything at all, any flaw in workmanship, anything decides it doesn't want to work, he will make right, period. Now, there are very few knife makers that actually have a reputation that they can state that and you know it to be true. And there's plenty of other makers that will hem and haw and make excuses as to why something's wrong and almost make it seem like it's your fault. And I've actually had a maker do that to me, and I no longer own that knife. These are the kind of guys that you want to buy from, the ones that know what they're doing, and they know that sometimes shit happens and they're going to make it right because they realize you're making an investment in what they're bringing out. Every knife he does is worked by hand until it's perfect. It's a slow process, it's a laborious process, but in the end, the final product makes it worth it. And again, going back to that comparison to an Apple product, and there's going to be people that get it and people that don't. There are plenty of people that love, let's use an iPhone for an example. They love the iPhone. And some people that hate the iPhone for no more reason than to just hate it because it's the popular thing. And that's fine. Some people get it and some people don't. Some people get the Mayos and some people won't. And I've kind of been not really one way or the other, kind of in between, because I do have an appreciation for a true, complete, full hand-built knife. And I love the simplicity in which he designs. Yes, there are, take my Una for example. There are certain knives that I love because it's so garish, because it is so over the top, and the unique combination of materials and finishes and everything else. And it's a true hand-built product. But there are times that I really do appreciate simplicity. I use my Shiragorovs for that example. There is nothing over the top or fancy or crazy about this knife. I love it for its simplicity. One of the reasons I've always said I love the Chris Reeve knives, based on its simplicity. So I think I'm in a more unique position because I have an appreciation for both types. And some people are really black or white. And I think out of these three, this is the one that may interest more general people, not necessarily knife lovers or knife collectors or anything like that, but in general, seeing the carbon fiber, seeing the way it's been worked, how slim it is, and how it doesn't give. It's got a very simple pocket clip. By the way, of the three knives, this is the only one that has a pocket clip that came that way from Mayo. The other two are aftermarket, and he doesn't offer any Timascus clips. The simplicity in which these are designed also lends to its performance, to its reliability. The fewer parts you have in anything, the more reliable it's bound to be. And with these, you've got a nice smooth action. I'm not going to say it's the smoothest action I've ever felt, or the fastest. Of the three, this is the fastest and easiest to manipulate. But you don't really have an uber crazy smooth knife. It's made to tight tolerances. And some of the things that you want to look at when you're judging a knife. And again, these are all knives that are carried on a daily basis. I want to make that very clear. You're going to see marks on them and everything else. Because these are guys that don't just appreciate collecting knives, they appreciate using them. So you're going to see these are used. But even dirty and used, you see that is a finished lock face. He takes the time to finish every piece of material on this knife. This is a very simple but very smooth, beautifully done blasted titanium. And he blasts it on both sides. He cleans everything up. Everything is nicely rounded and dehorned. You don't have any sharp edges. I felt a little bit of a hot spot on this one tonight because Chris insisted that I carry this knife. So I did. I usually don't carry anybody's guest blade even when they tell me I can. But I said, you know what, he's got all kinds of marks on this, and it's not like it's a pristine brand new knife, so I didn't feel bad about it. And I noticed over repeated disengaging of the lock that it's a little bit sharper in here than I particularly like it to be. But then I go back here to the Dr. Death, and it's wonderfully smooth. Everything is contoured and rounded. This is one of his flat-sided models, the same thing with this guy right here. This is going to be flat as well. Whereas you get into the Moran and you get into a fully 3D contoured frame, nicely rounded. So you've got a bit of a palm swell here in the middle. And I realize I'm kind of bouncing back and forth, but there's a lot of area to cover. This is just basically talking about his design philosophy and the quality in manufacturing. Beautiful satin on this blade. And from everybody I've talked to that owns a Mayo, they seem to be or require less amount of maintenance. Number one, with a steel choice, less time sharpening, less time stropping, and in the case of the 6K especially, and then even less time lubricating. We'll get to that in a little bit. Oh, yeah, it's more exotic than you think it is. Now, from what I understand, Tom really doesn't particularly enjoy working with carbon fiber, and most makers don't. It's a nasty, messy material that creates a shitload of dust. It's all over you, and it's just a pain in the ass to have to deal with. So a lot of makers just really don't like to work with it. So to find one of these in carbon fiber, come to find out, is a pretty rare find. So it's kind of a neat thing that he's got this. And he did a lot of work with the holes on there as well. And the holes really are Mayo's signature. If there's any one particular thing that screams, my knife is a Tom Mayo, or my knife was modified by Tom Mayo and beautified, or someone else's design, they will give credit to Mayo holes, because he likes drilling holes in shit. And I don't really know why. I would think that a practical purpose would be to reduce some weight in the knives, but there is a certain aesthetic beauty to the holes. whether it be a single hole like this, which actually I prefer, oddly enough. You start getting into multiple holes or rows and rows and many multiples of holes. I like this one a lot as well. No CNC, no water jet, everything done by hand. It's a dying art. That's one of the things I was discussing with John on the phone tonight. It's a dying art. True knife making. In a world where today everybody relies, not everybody, but a vast majority rely on CNC and water jet to begin their process, I don't feel it takes away from them being a true knife maker. But it certainly does eliminate a lot of the smaller issues and the hard work that goes into making each knife. The guy working with CNC and water jet can make 10 of these or more in the time that it takes Tom to make one. So there is a dramatic difference there. Now, let's break down each individual knife. As a matter of fact, I'm approaching 21 minutes here, so I'm going to cut this off here, and we're going to begin part 2 right after this. So we've got kind of the basic philosophies and who Tom is, and gotten a little bit of a look at the knives. In part 2, we're going to dissect each of the knives, get some nice HD close-ups. So if you're watching this right when it first gets uploaded, don't freak out that it's only in 240p. I record every video in full 1080 HD. Wait for YouTube to process it. These are videos that you want to see in HD. I'll be back here with you in a second. Go ahead and load up part 2.